Smashterpieces, a casual walk through the history of the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate roster. My name is Joe.
My name is Matt.
And if you're new to this show, what we are doing on here is playing one game for every character in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And today's game is the one that was picked to represent fighter number 13, Princess Peach. It is the 1988 NES game Super Mario Bros. 2 USA.
Which we learned immediately before starting recording that maybe we should have played Super Mario Advance specifically instead.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. So, this game, we mentioned it on the last episode during our pre-talk, but do you want to go ahead and explain why exactly we are calling it Super Mario Bros. 2 USA specifically?
Yes, so way back when Super Mario Bros. 2 was first released in Japan, instead of bringing it over to America, they decided that it was too difficult for American fans. And instead, they took an unrelated game called Doki Doki Panic, which was another game that Shigeru Miyamoto had worked on. And instead, they retrofitted it with a Mario skin and released it in the United States as Mario Bros. 2. Or Super Mario Bros. 2, rather. And then later, when Super Mario All-Stars came out on the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom and had both versions, this game that we played was referred to in Japan as Super Mario Bros. 2 USA. And the Japanese version was released in America as Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels.
And it's a game. It's a video game.
Well, I had a better time with it than you did. Overall,
I think that sounds a little... So here's the thing. We both played the SNES version. I played it on the actual SNES version of Super Mario All-Stars. You played it on the Wii port of Super Mario All-Stars. Which
is literally just a Mario All-Stars ROM on a disc.
Same game.
Yeah.
But, so if anybody's wondering, neither of us played the original NES version because we were told that the SNES version was better, because it's more forgiving in that... And the main reason it's more forgiving is because when you get a game over in the NES version, you go back to World 1. But if you get a game over in the SNES version, you go back to the first level of whatever world that you are currently in.
I also feel like in the NES version, you can't save your game at all, which I might be wrong on that, but just how NES games work generally...
Yeah. I would say that's a safe bet. I can't say for sure, but I'd say that's probably a pretty damn safe bet. So, overall, you did seem to have a better time with it than I did, but mainly you had a better time with the last few worlds. I enjoyed myself all the way through World 5.
Yeah, well, the game starts out very strong, I think. It's got unique mechanics that the previous Mario game didn't have, because it's not really a Mario game. And I think that really helps to add to the variety that you get when playing. And I think that the first bit of it is really good. Yeah,
there's one world in particular, I took notes this time, unlike the last games. There's one world in particular that is in that little beginning part that I think can eat my entire ass. In fact, that's what my notes say verbatim. And that's World 3-2, which is the first world where bombs are introduced. And I hate the bombs.
The bombs could be worse, but they could be better.
So, for me, and I don't know if maybe I'm just crazy, but they seemed inconsistent on whether or not they worked or not. So, what I mean by that is, I'd pick up a bomb, and there were parts of this level where you had to destroy walls with the bombs to move forward. And I'd throw the bomb, and apparently I'd just be a pixel or so off, and it wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be close enough to blow up the wall. But then I'd throw it in the exact same spot, and it miraculously worked this time. Fuck you. And I swear to God, that happened multiple times.
The game is inconsistent, and doesn't always work the way I feel it should.
Which you could say about most NES games, even though this was a SNES port, and therefore I feel like I should give it even less leeway? Like, because it's a remake.
I don't know. It's tough to say, I guess, because the original is worse in this regard. It's not a game that really holds up that well.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So I'm not really sure. I don't know. It's a big improvement on the NES version, and part of me just wants to say, okay, that's good enough. But it's also not good enough, because it's still a very frustrating game in a lot of ways. The mushroom blocks especially being a big example of things that just don't seem to work.
It's not that they decided, hey, we're going to make the game get harder, which is how games should go. There should be a difficulty curve as you get further in the game, especially with platformers like this. But the way they decided to make the game harder was basically say, what if we made it so that the player can't play the game? And that happens in multiple ways, I think. And the biggest one being the mushroom block is that later on, as you fight bosses, the only method you have of hitting them is with the mushroom block. Eventually it gets to the point where even Birdo can only get hit with the damn mushroom blocks.
Yeah, the green Birdos only shoot fireballs. But I literally do mean to say that the mushroom blocks feel like they are coded incorrectly. They feel broken.
Yeah, in that if you're not moving when you throw them, they just sort of limply fall in front of you.
I mean, sometimes when you are moving and you hold them.
Yeah.
It's just... The mushroom blocks, it feels like it's a small thing to be concerned with, but they are your primary method of dealing damage to bosses later in the game. Yeah. And that's just too much. It has to work, and it doesn't. It's the most fundamental thing in the game, and it's broken.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The mushroom blocks were basically, other than the bombs, my least favorite thing in the entire game. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to put it in any ways that you haven't just said, but yeah, they just don't work. They don't work. And you have to use them. You don't have a choice. And that's what makes them so bad.
I honestly think I would have a much higher opinion of the late game if the mushroom blocks just worked. And the reason that they don't work is because you're also supposed to use them as platforms in some instances, so they didn't want it to be overtly sensitive towards being thrown. But
then they should have made a different kind of block to use against bosses.
Yeah, number one, yes, they should have made a different kind of block. But also, number two, sometimes when I wanted to put them down, I would throw them. So it doesn't even work.
Yeah, it fucking...
I don't understand why they couldn't make... It's not even like this game was rushed out the door. It's the All-Stars version.
Yeah, again, as we say, it's a remake. This was a remake we were playing, and they changed stuff. They rebalanced some stuff.
I've never played the NES version. I don't know if it's better or worse in this regard, but I can tell you that the SNES version, as far as the mushroom blocks go, doesn't work.
And the other thing that I didn't like about the later game is that there would be points where... There was one point. I remember you watching me do this part on stream, but there's a level where... Let me ask you this. How do you kill enemies in Super Mario Brothers 2?
You throw stuff at them.
Yeah. So what happens when you can't throw stuff at them?
You find stuff to throw stuff at them.
Yeah, but then what happens when the platforms are put together in such a way that if you throw something, it just lands on the platform above what you were throwing it at?
Then you throw it somewhere else.
What if you can't throw it somewhere else? My point is, that only happened once. That was only an exact situation that only happened one time. So it's
Which
not
boss was that?
Egregious. It wasn't even a boss. It was just a level. I think it was one of the levels in 6 where it was this sort of staircase formation of platforms, but they were so close together that if you tried to throw the Shy Guys that were walking on them, they'd just land on the next level up and then just keep walking. And you couldn't hit stuff.
Right.
And there was nowhere else you could throw them because you're walled in.
I believe I know what part you're talking about. Yeah.
And that only happens once. It's not egregious, because again, it's not like that happens multiple times in the game, but it happened that once, and it was enough to stick it in my head as a thing of, oh, so the developers just didn't want me to play the game.
Yeah. I don't think the level design is really that egregiously bad, for the most part.
I think just anything having to do with bombs was the only problem I had with the level design. Well, that and the levels where it's just like, all right, now you are riding an enemy. Have fun.
Yeah, I love when the way that you play the game is by not playing the game.
Like, those aren't even just bad. They're just boring. Boring? They're just boring.
That's the worst sin that a game can commit. It's not bad, it's just boring. That's what it comes down to. That's the worst of it. And the big sticking point for me with regards to like where the game is outright bad is how punishing it can get. Because I don't mind if it takes me time to get my way through a level, but what I do mind is where if I don't get it right the first time, I have to go back and redo entire previous levels. This is why I think it's a good thing that overall lately we have moved away from having lives in video games, because it allows you to make the levels themselves more challenging without feeling bullshit. Because when I'm playing a level in Super Mario Bros. 2 USA, I'm not thinking, oh, I need to do this over and over again until I get it right because I'm learning the level. I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, if I lose here, I have to go back and do an entire other level I've already finished, sometimes two. And that's not fun. That's overtly punishing. That's where it stops being difficulty and starts being busy work. And that's some horseshit. That's what I don't like in games. And that's the big problem. I had this problem with Castlevania, but it's exacerbated in Mario 2 USA. Because in Castlevania, those levels that you had to redo, they were at most like 5 minutes. Yeah, I didn't like it there, but it wasn't nearly as bad. In Mario 2 USA, you lose 15, maybe 20 minutes if you have to go back. And that's unreal. That's way, way too much.
Yeah, it's not fair, but it's also just, it's not fun. So there was one specific area that both of us sort of compared to a more modern game. Like, directly, both of us had the exact same thought, which was there's a part where you fall down a pit. The pit is multiple screens, and there are spikes. And it looks like a level from VVV.
Which is a game that doesn't have lives.
We both love VVV. I'd say it's up there as both of our favorite indie game at the very least. And we both had the exact response of, oh, this is like VVV. And you pointed out that, like, this is only acceptable in that game because you respawn immediately.
Yup. You respawn immediately, like a maximum of 20 seconds back, and there's no lives. So a single death doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of losing progress. It's so much more tolerable. The more difficult a game is, the less punishing any given death has to be. And it's unreal how this game gets that ratio so wrong. Because I don't think any of the level design in this game is outright bad, except those sections where you're just sitting on an enemy that's going on its own and you have no input. Those parts are boring, and I don't think those parts are good. But otherwise, I actually think the level design in Mario 2 USA is pretty good. I think overall, it's a pretty greatly designed game as far as the levels go. But every time that I have to go back to the beginning of an entire world 20 minutes ago, the next 20 minutes of the game are fundamentally not fun because it's a challenge I've already cleared.
Especially if it's a challenge that was already really hard for you to clear.
Yeah.
What's the good in making you do that again? Like,
it makes me appreciate Castlevania more. Because in Castlevania, the time between your maximum loss of progress is so short. They ramp up the challenge so much that they can give you the opportunity that it's not about going back and redoing old challenges. It's one level that you need to get down perfectly. You need to have it in your muscle memory. I find that acceptable outside the bosses themselves because, go listen to the last episode, I hated the bosses because you don't actually have the opportunity to learn them for a similar reason for what I'm saying now. But it's such a stark contrast to Mario 2, which doesn't do it to the same extent. It's not as difficult, but it still has that aspect of you need to learn the levels and learn what you're doing, but also you don't have time to learn them because you're so stressed out about the fact that if you don't get it perfectly the first try, sucks for you, you're going all the way back. It's a fundamental failing of games that were designed when arcades were still big worldwide, and video games were about being forced to go back so you'd put in more quarters.
Which doesn't make sense for this game, because it was never made for arcades!
It's the quarter-munching mentality, because back then, that's the only games that people knew how to make. And that's how games were then. And it's because they had to do that to fit more onto a cartridge. And in Mario 2 USA, when they made that game this way, it was because if they didn't, you'd beat it in 3 hours and feel like you didn't get your money's worth. And that's just how games were back then. But it's garbage in a port that was made years later, after this mentality was proven to be ridiculous, and has four other full-length games on it, depending on which cartridge you have. You're on this very same cartridge, you would have Mario 1, the other Mario 2, Mario 3, and if you had the special one, Mario World. Why do you need this one individual game to be so heavily leveraged on getting your money's worth out of it and playing it for hours more than it actually has? And you can't tell me that, it's just the system that they used for the NES version, because they added in checkpoints at game overs! And those checkpoints are bad! It's a game that's almost good! And that's why I'm like, I should have played the GBA version! I should have played Super Mario Advance! Because that's the one I played as a kid! That's what I remember liking, but I don't remember all the details of. And I went into Mario USA on the All-Stars version thinking that it was the same game! And I was so wrong! It's so much better on Game Boy Advance!
I think this is the first time you've, slowly raised your voice as the rant has gone on. And this whole we talked about Kid Icarus and you didn't even get this heated.
It's because Kid Icarus is... Mario 2 USA is the only game that I've played in this so far where I can't only say, this could have been better. I have played it better. I have played the Game Boy Advance version, and it's so much better. And there's no reason that the Super Nintendo version couldn't have had the stuff that makes the Game Boy Advance version tolerable. And it's not just a game that could have been better. It's a game that was better years later. And there's no reason that they couldn't have made that version on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that sounds agreeable. A lot of my biggest problems with this game stem from the fact that we played a remake that didn't fix 90% of the problems the game had in general.
It fixed one really big problem, and that's about it.
But it didn't fix it enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too little. And I would recommend anyone interested in playing this game, do not play any version before the Game Boy Advance version. And if you've played the Super Nintendo version or the NES version and have felt like you didn't really like it, try the Game Boy Advance version. Because the Game Boy Advance version makes so many differences in the game design that makes it a better game. It has a better save system. It's more generous with hearts so that you never feel like one mistake is hugely detrimental, which is the biggest problem that I've had so far with Kid Icarus, Castlevania, and Super Mario 2 USA, they've all felt like one mistake at the beginning of a level. You might as well just restart the level because you're not coming back from that. The Game Boy Advance version is generous with hearts so that one mistake is not as horribly damaging. The Game Boy Advance version is just so much better. And I went into this today expecting to be a bit more fair to Mario 2 USA because I did really like the level design, and I did think it was overall a good game with some blights on it. But then, literally 1 minute before we started recording, I looked up the differences in the Game Boy Advance version, and everything fell apart. The curtain was pulled back. And I haven't had time to emotionally process that.
Anyways, this sounds like a good segue to talk about. So I want to bring up real quick. Holy shit! So much Mario lore came out of this game, though. Like,
yeah,
Birdo, Shy Guy. Those are the obvious ones. We talked about those last time. But then you've got, like, you mentioned last episode that you thought the Bob-Ombs came from this game, and I thought they came from 3. But no, you're right. They're from this game.
Yep. Not to mention Sniffits and Pokies.
Pokies, I had no idea. I didn't know they were from this game. I thought they were from 3.
Yep. There's also, obviously, we mentioned the gameplay differences between the characters, which would come back in a big way in Mario 3D World.
Yeah. And obviously would also come back in Smash specifically for Peach.
Yes.
Where her turnips and her float ability both come from this game specifically.
Yeah. Well, and also even the how she can randomly pull out a Bob-Omb in Smash. That's because sometimes when you're pulling out vegetables, sometimes it's a bomb.
Yeah,
which I know you hated. I didn't think that was that egregious.
I think it was bad when they were the Bob-Ombs, because there were some points where it was like, haha, you're stuck in a place where you can't throw it, and they explode immediately. They explode within half a second.
Okay, yeah.
That happens a couple of times, and that's bullshit. I don't really hate the fact that you can pull out the bombs. I just don't think the bombs themselves work.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I'll give you that.
One big problem I have with this game, and maybe you didn't have the same sort of thought, and it's unfortunately kind of a problem that is going to follow us into our next game, is that pits are a little bit inconsistent and unclear about whether that pit means death or more level.
Yeah, that's not great. Sometimes you're supposed to jump into what looks like a bottomless instant death pit.
Yeah, and that's not good level
That's
design.
Never good design. Never.
And again, that's unfortunately going to follow us into the next game, so that's not something that gets solved after this, but I don't think we'll hit it again after we pass the NES era, because it's widely agreed upon that that's bullshit. Don't do that.
Yeah, no, you should never have ambiguity between instant death pit and place you're supposed to go.
Yeah. And that was never a problem per se, but it's also just a thing that you notice and you just sort of say to yourself, that's not good level design. Don't do that. Don't do that, kids.
One thing that I do want to say I liked about the game, which I know you're going to disagree with me big time, I like the boss fights.
I don't mind the boss fights, except for 2 of them. But go ahead.
Besides the fact that the mushroom block is broken, because it is, I think the boss fights are all pretty well designed. I never felt like there was one that was overtly unfair, and I felt like after 2 or 3 tries on each one, I had proficiency. I knew what to do to dodge, and anytime that I couldn't dodge was just my mistake, me being an idiot. I thought the worst of the bunch was the second Triclide fight, just because, well, the mushroom blocks and his fireballs were just too plentiful.
Yeah,
so like you could never get a hit in. But otherwise, I felt like all the bosses were overall pretty good.
So I have 2 bosses that I am not a huge fan of. One being Birdo, not because I think Birdo is bad or anything, but boy, You get sick of fighting Birdo by the end of this
There's
game.
a lot of Birdo in this game.
Birdo is fought at least twice, or once to twice in every single world in the game.
Yep, and there's 3 variants too. There's the regular pink of Birdo, which you see twice and 3 times and never shows up again, which always shoots eggs. There's the red variant, which shoots eggs and fireballs, and there's the green variant that only shoots fireballs and you have to kill with mushroom blocks.
Yeah. And so I don't, because Birdo's easy. Birdo's easy to fight. She's got a really easy to learn pattern. Once you've got it, sometimes they'll throw in something like, now you're fighting Birdo on ice, and that makes it a little bit harder. But overall, like, she's not a difficult boss. And I think she works very well, just, boy, you get tired of Birdo after a little bit.
Yeah.
Because no wonder she became a notable Mario side character after this game. No wonder she is the one on the title screen of All-Stars and not Wart or something. Because she is the game.
Yep. That, if there's one thing you remember from Mario 2 USA, it's Birdo.
But I also just kind of don't like Wart. And not because I think the boss fight itself is bad. I didn't have a good time with it, but that is just because I'm bad at video games. I can freely admit that. I'll admit that right here, right now. I was bad at the fight, but I don't think the fight is overall bad. I just take a little bit of issue with he changes the rules at the last second. And it's the same problem I sort of have with Dracula in Castlevania. Well, it's one of the problems I have with Dracula in Castlevania. I have a whole host of problems with Dracula in Castlevania. But for Wart, I don't like it when games change the rules for bosses at the very end.
How do you change the rule?
Because you have to throw it in his mouth. There's only a specific time where you can hurt him. It's not if it makes contact with him, you've hurt him.
It wasn't. It's not hard to aim it into, I guess. But
it is. So it is when you play as Peach. I learned this firsthand. Peach cannot throw far enough to hit him from the bottom, and if she throws it from the top, you have to have very, very good timing. Otherwise, the bubbles will just destroy your vegetable. What I'm saying, kids, is don't fight Wart as Peach.
Don't do most of the game as Peach, I've found.
I had a pretty okay time with Peach in, like, regular levels, but that specific boss, Peach was not well suited for. Or digging levels, also. Digging levels, Peach was not great for.
Yeah, I found Toad is more often than not pretty good. And it's easy enough to just switch over to someone else whenever Toad isn't up to snuff. I find that a majority of levels, Toad is your best choice.
And I wish that you could just switch characters on the fly in some way. This would break most of the game, so I understand why that's not the case. But I got to Wart with 1 life, and this wraps all the way back to your whole thing about the game being punishing and throwing you back multiple levels if you get a game over. I made it to Wart with 1 life as Peach. The only way to switch characters is to die and restart the level. I guess I'm fighting Wart as Peach. So, that was my main issue with Wart.
Yeah. I got in there with enough lives that I could just, if I died once, I figured out the pattern for the slot machine and walked into 7-2 with 21 lives.
You figured it. I almost figured it. You tried to explain it to me. I almost got it, but I didn't quite get it in the end. But yeah, you were a fucking master at the first thing of the slot machine.
And I came close to figuring out the second one, too.
So that's kind of cool. I guess we should explain the slot machine. Basically, sometimes when you pick a turnip, you won't pick a turnip. You'll pick a potion. And when you throw that potion, a door will appear. And if you throw that door, when you go through that door, it'll take you to like a weird negative version of the area, the exact area that you were in?
It's called, I think it's called Subcon.
Okay, I thought the whole world is Subcon.
I guess it is.
So sometimes in this negative world, you'll find mushrooms, and they give you an extra heart. And if you put it near a bunch of turnips that you can pick, when you pick the turnips in the negative world, there'll be coins. And each one of those coins is an attempt at the slot machine at the end of a level. And getting...
it's called Subspace, by the way, where the potion leads to.
But, you get a chance on the slot machine, and depending on your results on the slot machine, you get 1-ups. They're very useful if you can figure out the pattern. I didn't really, but I still got my fair share of help from them. I do like that mechanic. I think that mechanic's very good. It really rewards you for sort of not just throwing down the door right when you get it. So, I don't know. I like that mechanic overall.
I think that it's only good once you've figured it out. And once you figured out the pattern. If you haven't figured out the pattern, it's just random garbage. It's not really useful in most circumstances.
Just like real slot machines.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I don't really have anything else big to say about anything other than when watching the credits, I happened to notice, and I meant to look this up, actually, before we started recording to see if this was just a big mistake or anything. Birdo and Ostro are switched in the credits.
Oh, that's weird.
Birdo is referred to as Ostro, and Ostro is referred to as Birdo. But obviously that didn't stick because Birdo is Birdo. We know Birdo as Birdo. Which I think the next time she'd show up would be in not Super Mario Bros. 2 or a remake of that game, would be Mario Tennis. Because I think they specifically put her in that game to be a Yoshi partner, which doesn't make sense looking back on it, but hey, why not?
Birdo was in Mario RPG, actually.
Was she?
Yeah.
Well, alright then.
She's a boss.
Maybe Gino will be in the game and we'll have to play that.
She's also in Super Mario Bros. And Friends When I Grow Up, a DOS computer game featuring Mario and friends released in 1991.
Why didn't we play that?
The game is essentially a digital coloring book containing illustrations by Rick and Rocky. A few pages have animated sequences.
That's weird. But yeah, this was another sort of thing of the credits weren't the actual people who made the game. This was our first encounter with the credits art, the enemies in the game. Here's who treating the enemies as like, these are the actors that played these characters. And I kind of like that, and I think I miss that era of credits, but again, it was probably just like Castlevania, the attempt to prevent poaching, so they didn't want to put their developers' names out there, and I'm glad that we've gotten past that.
Yeah, I still think it's cool when they do an enemy roll at the end, so we can still learn their names, but yeah, it's good that now people that did work are credited for their work. And a novel concept.
Yeah, sure is. If only we'd thought of it sooner. But that's all I've got on Mario Bros. 2. I don't really have much else. I think overall it's a good game, but it's flawed heavily.
Should we talk about music?
We should talk about music.
All 3 songs?
All 4. 5. There's 5, I think, that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, so we...
I mean, let's just make a quick mention. We're required to make a mention of the overworld theme.
Yeah, which deserves a proper remix in Smash Brothers, which it has not had.
It has not. Which I believe it's the version we played. I believe that is the version of the song that is on the stage in Smash. It is not the NES version, I'm pretty sure.
Let me check. No, it's the NES version.
Really? Interesting.
I imagine in Ultimate, because they upgraded the graphics to the Game Boy Advance version, we'll get new music for it. But this is definitely the NES version.
But you've brought up in the past the character select theme,
which is legit.
It's a super good song. And I'm actually surprised that it is not, because I've heard it before. I didn't realize this before playing the game, but I had heard that song before. How is that song not in Smash?
Where have I heard it? Where else is it? I know it's used in other games. I can't remember where though.
I couldn't tell you. I just know that I've heard it before. But you know what song sucks? And I don't understand this pattern. This has been an issue in all of the NES games that we have played that have bosses. The boss theme is garbage.
Yes.
Every NES game is just like, well, we gotta make a boss theme. What should we do? How about the same 10 notes looped for 30 seconds? Yeah, sure. Cut it, print it, send it.
Call it a day.
Like, all of them are that. Even Castlevania, which had fantastic music otherwise, the boss theme is terrible. I don't understand.
I feel like we should also talk about the cave theme, not because it's particularly special in any way, but because it is, at this point, the only song we have not specifically talked about yet.
Well, there's also the wart fight.
That does have its own, doesn't it?
It does. And I don't think that song's terrible. It's unmemorable, but it's not terrible.
Did you know that all of the music was redone in Mario Advance? It's the same songs, but it's totally redone.
Well then.
Yeah, they redid every song on a Game Boy Advance sound font.
I mean, good. But yeah, that's about all I got on the soundtrack, because those are all the songs. All 5 songs on the soundtrack.
Yep.
There's not much, which is weird, but I guess if this game was close enough to be reskinned as a Mario game, I guess that sort of makes sense, because Mario games in general just sort of did that. They had 3 songs, 4 maybe.
Not a huge deal, but we are very nearly at the point where there's a lot more songs to talk about.
In fact, should we go ahead and get to that point right now?
No, I was thinking we'd give it a little time, let it stew in the pot for a bit.
No, fuck you, we're talking about Mega Man 2, that's our next game, baby!
Yay, our character number 46, Mega Man, and his Mega Dog.
Released on the NES in 1988, Rush is not in this game.
Then what's the fucking point?
Rush was introduced in Mega Man 3.
Why aren't we playing that?
Because Mega Man 2 is better. But not by much. So, many people have actually asked me specifically, I don't know about you, why aren't you playing Mega Man 1? Why you skipped to Mega Man 2? Let me answer that very simply. Mega Man 1 is a bad game. It is not good. It's It was probably fine when it came out, but then Mega Man 2 came out, and it's better in every way. There's a reason why when people talk about classic Mega Man, the NES era of Mega Man, they're talking about 2 and 3, not 1.
I think this might be the first game I have some real trouble with.
I have played Mega Man 2. As a kid, I bought it on Wii Virtual Console, and I was able to beat all of the worlds except for Heat Man and Quick Man, which I'm very worried about. But the point is, I was able to beat everyone else. And this was, might I add, when I had no idea how Mega Man games worked, and so I didn't realize that the Robot Masters had weaknesses to each other's weapons. Or in this game's case, had weaknesses to Metal Blade. And so
I'm going to go in trying not to look up those weaknesses in advance, so I don't know.
I sort of already know some of them. Not mainly because I looked them up. I haven't looked them up yet, actually, but I do remember a couple of them from when I've looked them up in the past. So I don't know if I'm going to hold back from really looking them up, but I know I can beat most of the bosses with the Mega Buster, because I've done it before, so I'm not too worried about it. What I am worried about, first off, I will say, fucking love Mega Man. Mega Man's awesome. These games are rad. Never beaten one. Ever. But I like playing them. I think that this is the first game where I can pretty much say I enjoy these games. I think these games are good, but I cannot promise I won't still get kind of heated, especially because I imagine it's going to be the same as every other NES game now has been. Well, I say every other NES game. The last 2 NES games now have been, where the beginning of the game isn't so bad. It's really fun. I'm having a good time. And then the end game is just when they're like, hey, fuck you.
Yeah, I don't know how this is going to go for me. I don't know. I've never really played a Mega Man game at all. I had Mega Man 9 on WiiWare, when it first released. But that was a while ago. So I don't really know what to expect. Mega Man is an unknown quantity for me, and I don't think I'm going to have save states for this one either, because I'll be playing the PlayStation 4 release of the Legacy Collection.
Well, I believe the Legacy Collection has rewinding.
God bless. Wow.
So that's cool, and honestly, I'm thinking of looking into that on Switch. That is on Switch, right? Yeah, it's on Switch.
I have no idea. It was free on PS Plus. I never actually bought it. I just received it.
But I believe it's got a rewind feature, if I remember correctly. That being said, Mega Man games do not pull punches. They are quite difficult, especially as you get later on. But my main piece of advice, I guess, is without even having to look up the weakness. It's not for all of them, but I'd do Metal Man first. Just my advice.
So that's the move that is neutrally in Smash Brothers, correct?
It is. He throws the Metal Blade. I think that's the only one that's... No, I think his up air is also from Mega Man 2. I believe that's Airman's move. That's where he shoots the tornado up, right? Or is that his up tilt? I know one of his moves is Airman's attack. So that I know that, but I believe most of his other moves are from various other Mega Man games.
Legacy Collection is in fact on Switch, by the way. It is currently on sale for $11.24.
That's not bad. I will probably look into that, and that might be the version I play as well.
Regular price is $15.
So you can buy Mega Man 2 on Wii U Virtual Console for $5, $4.99.
But why would you, when for only $11.24 you can buy the better Mega Man Legacy Collection on your Switch?
And you should buy one of those versions. Remember to please support the official release, always. And, yeah, that's about all I got. I'm looking forward to this. I am hoping to have a relatively good time with Mega Man 2.
I expect to have a time.
And then the NES era will be over and the evil will be defeated.
There's still going to be one more NES game.
Well, we do have one more NES game, but it is really far down the list relatively from everything else, and is also considered the anti-NES game because it does the opposite of pretty much every single game on the NES. So, we'll talk more about that when we get to it, but
shortly after is the PC Engine game.
Sure is. That's going to be weird. But on that note, I did want to bring up that you can follow us on Twitter at Smashterpieces. You can follow us on Facebook, again, at Smashterpieces. But it would also help us a whole lot if you, the person listening right now,
me,
with your ears. No, them. That guy.
Me. That's me.
No, yeah, sure, you. Why not? You can do this too. I don't care. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, be it on iTunes or Google Play, which are the two places where it's available, unless you're using the actual RSS. Getting ahead of myself. Give us a rating. Give us a review. It would really help us out.
That sounds corny, but it gets us that search engine optimization.
It does indeed. And tell your friends about the show. If they like Smash and they like video games, there's a chance they might like this show. So
we ask you to do this because it makes a real tangible difference.
It sure does, and we would like to see that difference happen. But with that, I don't really got anything else if you don't.
Nah.
Remember, you can find us at anondino.squarespace.com, where you can find not only a link to both of our Twitch accounts, where you can see streams of these games happen in the time between episodes, and more. I know you recently were doing some more Ocarina of Time randomizers.
Yeah, got some friends in on it. None of them were you.
Every once in a while, I will play a Nancy Drew game. Trust me, it's more fun than it sounds.
I also played some Hollow Knight yesterday.
But we do stream stuff that isn't Smashterpieces. I've sort of slacked on playing things that aren't Smashterpieces related, but that's where you can find those. And you can also find a link to the spreadsheet that is the full list of all the games that we will be playing. Not only can you keep track of what we're on, but if new characters get announced, we will have the games for those characters on that list probably within the day. So if you want to see that before the next episode happens, then that's going to be your time to go ahead, and that's going to be the place to check out.
I should probably go in and actually add proper release dates to those like I was planning to do.
Yeah. So, if you are going by the order, we said this in the Castlevania episode, if you're going by the order we said in episode 0, some of those have been slightly rearranged to be more accurate to their actual release dates. So, I'd go get a look on that. I'm going to work on getting a bit.ly link for the spreadsheet so that I can just say it in the show. I'll have that by the Mega Man 2 episode. But with that, my name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you all next time for Mega Man 2.
Yeah.